Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne,
Welcome to Empowered Now,
where we save humanity one relationship at a time. We all struggle from time to time connecting with and understanding others and ourselves.
So we hope to encourage you to live a more authentic and empowered life by sharing what we've learned as coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Now is LGBTQ2IA, alternative lifestyle, poly, and kink friendly.
Thanks for joining us
and enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 9, Jealousy in Consensual Non-monogamy. So this topic came about out of a few discussions that we've had with clients, each other, and some articles that I've read. And so I just wanted to bring it up as a general topic and discussion, try to cover as much as we can about what it is, what it looks like, how it shows up, what people do that may be a little bit controversial, and some things that we suggest that you do. So I'm going to turn it over to you, honey, and you can tell us more about jealousy and what the experience of jealousy is like for people.
For sure. Thanks. Great introduction. Thank you. So I'm a bit of a definitions guy. Like I'm a wordsmith. I'm a semantics person. So I think we should start off with the definition of jealousy.
Cool.
Just because that way we're all sort of, having a good understanding of what it is and what it means, right? Because I think there's a lot of misperceptions about jealousy. So jealousy generally refers to the thoughts or feelings of insecurity, fear, and concern over a relative lack of possessions or safety. It's a complex emotion that encompasses feelings ranging from suspicion to rage to fear to humiliation. And they can strike anybody of any age, any gender, any sexual orientation. The other caveat that I want to add to this too is that it can consist of one or more emotions such as anger, resentment, inadequacy, helplessness, or disgust.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So jealousy isn't just like, okay, I feel jealous. Jealousy is this complex thing that happens, and it can be one or all of these things that are happening. And it's generally triggered by an event or a thought or some assumption that you're making about the event or about the situation.
Got it.
So that's kind of what jealousy is really all about. And I think it's really important to just sort of start there and make sure that we're all on the same page.
So what is the emotional sort of experience of jealousy, and how long does it last, that kind of thing?
Sure. So, from what I understand and what I've read up on, typically this isn't just for jealousy, but this is for all emotions, actually, all high emotions. There's pretty much a 90-second trajectory where you're at the top of at the highest part of the emotional experience, and that lasts for about 90 seconds. And then after about 90 seconds, it slowly starts to come down. So what that means is, and I'll paraphrase that a little bit better because that didn't really make any sense. But once the trigger happens that sets off the jealousy or sets off the insecurity or the fear or the rage or whatever it is you're experiencing, that particular experience lasts for about 90 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean that the whole emotional experience lasts for 90 seconds.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Yeah, no. It doesn't mean that the whole emotional experience happens for 90 seconds. But that trigger, that immediate trigger response happens for about 90 seconds. And then the blood starts to slowly rush back into the frontal lobe of the brain where the processing begins. And then you can start to think about things again. So oftentimes, psychiatrists and psychologists recommend finding ways to ride out that 90-second. It's approximate. Sometimes it's 90 seconds. Sometimes it's a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's a minute, right? Ride that out using different tools. Like you can use the ice therapy, which is literally putting ice on your forehead and putting your head between your legs. And if that's convenient, or if you have a stopwatch, you can actually literally start it and look at the watch for a total of 90 seconds, bringing your awareness to the experience of the emotion versus actually just experiencing it and being reactive to it, right? So those are just a couple of things that you can do. But once that 90 seconds starts to dissipate, then you can actually start to get back into the processing, the intellectual processing of the experience and what the trigger was and why and all of that stuff. Does that make sense?
It does. And so
okay,
what happens when the reaction continues longer than 90? Does that mean that we're being re-triggered?
It can, or it could also mean that your experience is higher than usual. higher than normal. Like, this isn't a set rule. It doesn't mean that every single experience is going to happen in 90 seconds. Sometimes it could be like, I've experienced extreme jealousy in my life, especially when I was younger, and even recently, actually. And it lasted for a lot longer than 90 seconds. And part of the reason for some of that is that I wasn't out of the trigger. So I kept getting triggered repeatedly, or I kept triggering myself repeatedly.
Yeah. Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Your thoughts.
Yeah. So you get into that cycle, right? That cycle of, the stories that we tell ourselves, right? The suspicions and whatnot. So that's maybe why we're experiencing it for longer than the 90 seconds or 2 minutes, right? It's because we're continually being re-triggered, or we're re-triggering ourselves. So just a little disclaimer before we go any further. This information isn't coming from me based upon like the fact that I'm a psychologist or I'm a therapist. This is coming from me based upon my own personal experiences, my experiences as a professional life coach and a relationship coach and empowerment coach with my clients and what they share with me, as well as various therapies that I've done over the course of my life, and various research and so on and so forth. But I just need it to be known that this is not a clinical diagnosis or anything like that at all. So.
Yeah, I think we should put that disclaimer on all of our podcasts. We are coaches, and we share our life experience, and we bring that training and experience that we have to the table for our clients and for our viewers and our listeners. So one of the things that, might be confusing to people if they're new to this kind of relationship is that they might not know why we're using the term consensual non-monogamy instead of ethical non-monogamy. For me, it's a distinction between ethics being personal and value-based. So they can change from person to person based on what they've been taught and what belief systems they hold to be true. Whereas consent is a little easier to identify when it's occurring or when it's not occurring, as long as it's informed consent, right? So people come into a non-monogamous relationship, meaning that you have more than one partner that you are intimate with, and it's consensual. So everyone knows that it's happening, and they have all agreed to that. So that's the definition of that. So we've covered our definitions. All right.
Well, not only that, though, everybody has the same amount of information.
Right. Thank you. So what are the things? Yeah. Okay. So when we're in a traditional monogamous relationship, you'll experience jealousy then too, right? It's not like it doesn't exist in a monogamous relationship. In fact, it can be just as prevalent. But with non-monogamy, because your partner sees other people, is actively dating other people and forming connections with them, the opportunities for jealousy are greater, right? Whereas in a monogamous relationship, in my experience, for example, it might be I'm with my partner, we're out on a date, and the waitress gets into a conversation with my partner, and suddenly I'm left out of the conversation, and I'm watching these two, and it looks like they're flirting together, and I'm feeling jealous, right? I feel maybe some anger that it's taking up time from our special date. Maybe I'm feeling like I'm not as good looking as the waitress is, whatever it is. So it happens in monogamous relationships too. I just want to put it out there. But here in the non-monogamous arena, the opportunities are far more prevalent. So there's a lot more opportunity for it to come up for you. So what are some of the things that that bring up jealousy? Do you want to address those?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to use my handy dandy notes here too.
Hey.
Right?
Yes.
Cheater, big note taker.
No, you're allowed notes.
Yeah. So a couple of things, a few things here. So I think just knowing that your partner is interested in someone else can create that feeling of insecurity and jealousy. Witnessing your partner be intimate with someone else. And that doesn't necessarily mean, so when we say intimate, it's not just physical intimacy.
Right.
It can also be other types of intimacy, emotional intimacy, It could be, energetic intimacy, right? So you can tell when your partner's around somebody that they like, and their energy changes, right? So it's not that they have to necessarily be touching or making googly eyes at each other or having sex in front of you or whatever. It can still be that tension that builds up inside. And I know I've experienced that before, where it's like, okay, I definitely know my partner's digging on this person. It's definitely bringing up some shit for me, for sure, when I see that sometimes, right? So seeing your partner do things with someone new that you wanted to do with them, right? So that's an important thing. And also to that point too, seeing your partner do things with new partners that you've done together before, right? Maybe there's like, oh, I thought that was our thing, right?
That comes up a lot for my clients, actually, the feeling of, my favorite restaurant is my favorite because it's ours, right? And it belongs to us. And there's that sense of sort of territory, right? It's my territory.
Yeah. Right.
And then my partner brings their new partner to that same restaurant, and suddenly it's not my territory anymore. Oh no, right?
Right. And it feels less special. It feels like it's almost as if that meaning has been taken away from it. Right. Which is interesting. I mean, I feel like that's a whole other podcast that we could talk about, because those experiences, I mean, those have happened to me in my growth and my journey as well. So the other one would be, and this is more of an internal thing, but it's unmet needs like intimacy, sex, and companionship. So maybe you're not getting those needs met from your partner, but you're seeing your partner engage in those things consistently with other people. Right. Yep. And then, insecure attachment styles. Just a shameless plug here. We are going to be having Jessica Fern on the show on May 1st to talk about secure attachment and polysecure and her book Polysecure and stuff. So really, really super excited. Yay. Just remember May 1st. And then also seeing metas belongings. And this is interesting because I never thought about this before. So a meta, just so we have clarity for those that don't understand the term, a meta would be if I'm dating somebody, we'll call that person, Billy. If I'm dating Billy, then Leanne and Billy are metas. Right. Okay. Right. So, and if Leanne is dating, Steve, then Steve and I are metas. So that's what a meta is. So seeing metas belongings in your car or home, also smells, right? That's something that you and I have experienced, was smelling your meta on your partner when they come in the door or whatever can also be a trigger as well. Yeah,
that's a great list. It's not exhaustive because there's lots of things that can bring up jealousy. And sometimes it's even just having, like the very first one that you said is like your partner's interested in someone else, or even having your partner just be interested in non-monogamy, right?
Right.
And funny enough, in my experience with my clients, and in my personal experience, it can shift depending on whether they're interested in non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, which is, being intimate with other people, right? And it can shift depending on if they are also interested in polyamory, which is beyond that in terms of more of emotional connection happening, right? So with the consensual non-monogamy piece, it may be platonic and intimate, or it may be sexual and intimate, but it is not necessarily a situation where you intend to fall in love, or you're intending to have a loving connection for a really, extended period, which is sort of the focus of polyamory. And so depending on where your comfortability is, one or the other might feel more comfortable to you, right? I'm okay with my partner having sex with other people, but they better not fall in love. Or I'm okay with my partner loving other people, but I really don't want them to have sex with them, right? Like that kind of.
Or I don't want to know about it.
Right.
And if I find out about it, like if I find out accidentally or whatever, then that could be a trigger for me.
Well, and that happens too, right? I'm working with some poly-mono couples. So one partner is monogamous, one partner is polyamorous, and the mono partner typically is the one who struggles more with the jealousy piece because there's more opportunity for it. And they often have a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy initially, at least, so that it's almost like it's not happening for them, right? It's almost like the polyamorous partner isn't connecting with other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine to a point. I think it's a healthy decision when you're very easily triggered. And maybe that would be a helpful place to begin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask, don't tell. If I don't ask, you won't tell me. So that's an idea. But for me, I always want to have transparency with my partner. So at the very least, personally, I want some information. I want to know, who you're going to meet. I want to know where you're going to meet. I want to know when I'll see you next, right? Those kinds of parameters. Also sexual health, right?
Yeah, that's a big one, right?
That information.
Right. The other one too that comes up for me that we didn't cover was witnessing a lot of new relationship energy. Right.
Right.
So being witness to that, right? And maybe that's part of the whole, energy when you walk in the room and you can feel it or experience it, right? But I think it's also too, I read recently somewhere that somebody said that, before you come back to your anchor partner, maybe take 5 minutes and, after having been with yeah, right. Is that
That
you
was me.
said that? Okay, so then tell me about it. Tell me, because I'm not going to do it justice. So tell me what you said.
That was me giving advice on a poly support group.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Oh, how ironic.
I knew I read it somewhere from somebody that was really fucking smart, but anyway, right? Way smarter than I am. But anyway, yeah. So what was it you said?
Well, basically what I said was I intentionally spend some time before I come home into the house. Sometimes it's like I've driven home and now I'm just going to sit in the garage for a few minutes. I might do some tapping, which is something that I do to kind of, regulate my energy system. I might do a little bit of meditation, some mindful breathing, some, relaxation of the body, because I recognize that when you're in that new relationship energy, you've met somebody, you think they're cool, you're excited, it's been a good date. That is great, but do you want to bring all that in the door and, have your partner deal with that level of interest and energy that's about someone else, right? Now, if your partner is full of compersion, which means they are super happy for you and they're excited by you, or you're going out on a date and they think it's great, fantastic, bring the energy in. But if your partner is struggling on any level with jealousy or any other emotion that might be triggered by new relationship energy, great to just take that 5 minutes for yourself and for them to balance out, because you have to remember too, new relationship energy is all about, endorphins and pheromones, and it's like being on drugs. And so we're high, right? We're high from that. And we want to not necessarily come in looking like we're out of our heads.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Even though, we want to experience the joy of it, but we also want to find the balance. That's the key
balance
for
is
me.
The key. Yeah, right. Balance and not overwhelming your anchor partner or your other partner,
Sure.
whatever it is. And I think the same thing holds true too, if it's a not necessarily a positive experience.
Right.
Like if something challenging has happened with another partner and you're bringing that into your anchor partner dynamic or whatever, I think it's also important to make sure, because jealousy can happen there too, right? Like you can, and it could be like, well, this relationship isn't working or whatever. And so then that brings in a host of other types of feelings, right?
Sure.
And energy and stuff. So I think it's also mindful to do that as well. And just to, make sure, and we'll get into in a minute, things that, we suggest or we've tried doing that seem to help, whether we're the ones experiencing the jealousy or whether our partner is. So,
well, that's one of them. The energy.
Yeah, that's certainly, I was going to say that is certainly one of them for sure. Absolutely. So maybe.
And I just want to touch on, not everybody lives with a partner, right? And
Right.
so it could not, it might not be a situation where you're coming from one date immediately to see another partner, but you're still getting off the phone with them or whatever, and you want to switch modes, right? You want to switch your attention to a different person and not be distracted by, the mental gymnastics that are going on about the other relationship, good, bad, or otherwise.
Right. So practicing presence, right?
Practicing presence, right?
Being present with what's happening in front of you. When if you're on the phone call with a new relationship, then you're being present with that. You hang up the phone and then you become present with what's going on, whether that's kids or responsibilities or relationships or whatever it is, right? So practicing being present. It's a really good opportunity to practice that too. So,
Love it.
I'm curious. So what sorts of things do people do to deal with jealousy? I mean, right?
Okay, so some of the more controversial choices are immersion of your partner in your polyamory. For example,
so exposure therapy.
yes. And some people call it like brutal poly, which, it has a negative connotation.
All right.
And I've heard that this can work for people. My concern would be overwhelming the system of your partner who is not in a space or a place where they can manage that. And so that would be my concern, right? And I always want to, as a partner, I always want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to support the relationships that I'm in. So, and that means each one of them individually. And so that means, doing my best to recognize when I'm overwhelming someone. So that's, sort of the immersion piece of like a potential approach. The other ones that people will sometimes implement are rules. You can't do this, right? You can have sex with them, but you can't fall in love with them.
Right.
Good luck.
You can have sex with them, but you can't kiss them, or you can't have makeout sessions, or can't, right? Yeah.
Yes. So we're trying to control, like these are controlling behaviors, right? We're trying to control the situation that we feel is out of control.
Right.
And beyond that, we can use structure to create the illusion of safety. So, using language like you're my primary and this person is my secondary, which, if it's prescriptive, meaning this is how it has to be, and this is the rule in place, I think that's where it's really damaging. If it's descriptive, so say, for example, this is a description of what's just naturally occurring organically, fine, right? But I would never really refer to a partner as secondary. I certainly wouldn't do it in front of them, even if that was a description of what was organically occurring, right? Because nobody really wants to feel that they're in that position unless there is some advantages to that. Like I've been a secondary before. And in that long distance relationship, my boyfriend had a wife and children, and I went to visit, and I enjoyed the secondary position because I didn't have responsibilities when I showed up. I was a guest. I was, treated very well as a guest and welcomed into the home, right? But I wasn't asked to help parent or make financial decisions or, so there are advantages to being in that role. And if you're comfortable with the terminology, I think it's up to that person to use it, not to have someone use it to describe them, because that could be very hurtful.
Right. And then there's also the structure of a relationship too, right? Couples privilege comes to mind, right? That's a big one that helps people feel secure and might relieve some of that, potential for jealousy. But the reality is it doesn't really relieve the potential, the jealousy. It's still there. Like that's the thing with all of this stuff is these feelings are still going to be there. It's just whether or not you're willing to step into that energy. And I'm like you, it doesn't necessarily, that whole exposure therapy thing doesn't resonate with me.
No.
Unless it's consensual, unless there's conversations that are had beforehand saying, hey, do you want to experiment with this and try it and see how it goes for you?
Yeah, right.
With the understanding that you can, call red or whatever you need to at any point, and then we can stop doing it and reevaluate at that point. But if it's something that you feel like is just, maybe I'm going to get some backlash from this, but if it's something that you feel like is just who you are and the way you do things, it feels like it lacks personal responsibility to me. It really does. And that's just my personal opinion on it, but it feels like it just lacks that component of, hey, I'm going to check in with you because you're somebody that I care about and somebody that matters to me, and I want to make sure that my actions aren't negatively impacting you.
Right.
Or at the very least, give you a heads up that my actions might negatively impact you, and be very clear about that. And then check in with you and find out if there are reassurances that you might need or anything like that before, so as to potentially mitigate that, or at least give you a safe space to be able to process those should those come up.
Exactly.
But we both know people, and it's just an alignment thing, right? For me, it's just like I don't want to be in that situation. Yeah. So,
and I just want to address the ultimate couples privilege. So couples privilege, for those who aren't aware, is the idea that when you are a couple, you have privileges that are not extended to the people that you're dating and in a relationship with. And so you can't really get rid of that, especially if you share a house or parent together, share finances. Those kinds of things really lend themselves to a lot of couples privilege. And there's things like time, energy, and resources that a couple will have more access to just because of the amount of time that they spend together, as opposed to the people that they are dating outside the home. Right. And the ultimate couples privilege is veto power, which would be, someone says to their spouse, you have the power to tell me that I cannot date someone if you don't like them, or if they offend you in some way, or you become overwhelmed. You can say no, and I will stop. And so I think people who date those in a couple often fear being labeled secondary, being treated as though they're dispensable, dismissive kinds of attitudes toward them. Undervalued, less time, less energy, resources, etc. So there can be a lot of concern for someone who is dating someone who's part of a couple, and that's natural and to be expected. And couples privilege exists. It's how we manage it that matters, right?
Right. And I think too, the word insecurity comes up as I hear you talking about that. I think that person who's dating a couple, they can bring up a lot of insecurities. And the best way that I've heard to manage that, and I know this is maybe a little bit off topic, but the best way that I've heard to manage that is to take a look at the relationships as individual relationships, right? And so there's 7 total relationships happening with 3 different people, right? There's a relationship that so let's say I'm the I don't want to use the word third, but I'm the new partner in a couple's relationship, right? So there's the relationship that I have with them individually, so that's 2. There's the relationship that they have with each other, that's 3. There's the relationship that they each have with me, that's 4 and 5. There's the relationships that we all have with ourselves, right? So I think that's the breakdown of those relationships. So reality is that if you treat each relationship individually, then you can mitigate a lot of that couple's privilege that might be, I don't want to say easy to fall into, but that might be the trap that you can fall into, right? And then the other thing too is there are, it's not either of our experiences, though it has been at one point in my life. There are situations where people do move in together, and they create lives together. So that responsibility, and then they do a what they call a closed polycule, right? And so everybody is dating everybody, or everybody's in a relationship with everybody, and they're all living together, and they're all sharing those responsibilities, raising kids, paying bills, housework, the whole 9 yards, right? So there is that opportunity and that option, even if there are only 3 people involved.
Right. And
really
not every. Sorry, say again.
It just really depends on what aligns with you and what you personally want, right?
And not every triad is a closed polycule either. They may be having other relationships outside the home.
Right.
Right.
And that's the relationship that I missed, actually, is the relationship of the three of you. Right. So that's the other part of that relationship. Then there's also the concept of, along with couples privilege, there's also the things like one penis policies, and things like that. Again, those constrictive rule control behaviors, that say that you can only have, mine is the only penis that you can use. You can date as many women as you want, but you can't date any men, or, gender reversal, or whatever gender you identify with. Right. So I think those are things to be mindful of too. And those are all attempts to avoid, in my opinion, the insecurities that come with jealousy.
Sure. And it's actually rather biphobic. The one penis policy is quite prevalent in a lot of, couples that begin their poly journey or their C&M journey. And yeah, what it is essentially says is that I don't believe that you could have a deep or meaningful connection with someone of the same gender.
Right.
Right. But I'm threatened by you having that connection, or even just enjoying sex with someone of my gender. Right. So from the male perspective, it's that real fragility, right, of the ego there that shows up.
Right. Yep, for sure. And that's, but it's important to note that it does happen the other way around. The one penis policy, but there's also the one vagina policy too, where women will be like, you can have sex with as many men as you want, but you can't have any intimate relationships with women, because it's all about the identity, right? It's all about your identity, and trying to find ways to feel secure with that, and to create a secure attachment within your relationship. Right. Yeah. So.
Right.
Sure.
And so, and we call it the illusion of safety because we recognize too that, no matter what controls are in place, what rules are in place, shit happens. It does.
Yeah. Well, I would go maybe even a little step further. And I would say, in my experience, the more rules, the more attempts to try to create structure, try to create safety through structure, the more harm has come. The more I have felt like I didn't want to be in this relationship anymore. And then the relationships that I've been in that have been really loving and kind and wonderful are the ones that were incredibly expansive, that didn't have any of that, like ours, for instance. Right. And I know ours has been a growth process, because we started out one way and now here we are, 5 years later or whatever, and we're in a very different experience. But the point is that the more expansive something becomes, the more freedom there is in that, the more trust is required. But with that trust, over time comes an immense amount of security that you just will not get. It's a false sense of security that you get from trying to control and create through structure or rules. It really is a false, like you said, the illusion of safety, right? Because the more constrictive you try to get with somebody, at least me anyway, the more I'm gonna, kick and fight.
Well, that's because you have defiance disorder, but that's another episode.
No, I don't. You have defiance disorder.
Don't tell me what to do.
You don't know what you're talking about. I don't either. Okay, moving on.
All right. So what are some things that we can do if our partner is feeling jealous? We've talked about a couple of things: reducing the NRE energy that you're bringing into a conversation or into the home or into a date. Really trying to practice presence. I love that. What else did we talk about?
Did you mention being grounded? Like grounding yourself before you come in the door, right? We talked a little bit about that. Yeah. I think some of the other ones, giving reassurance, right? Avoid oversharing, which I think is something that we might have touched on.
Huge. Ding, ding, ding. Okay. So the thing about oversharing is you don't know when it has happened. Right. So how do you know? How do you navigate that with somebody? So, say I'm, really excited to talk to you about my date, and I come home and I start talking. What can I do differently?
Well, I think first off, what you can do is ask. Make sure that the person that you're talking to is receptive to it. So you want to check in with them, check the timing of things, make sure they have the spoons or bandwidth or whatever you want to call it to be able to receive that information. And then also make sure that they're frankly interested in hearing it.
And what they're interested in hearing.
Right, exactly. Right. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, we're coming from that level of excitement and like, oh my God, this is just fucking amazing and wonderful. And oh my God, I can't wait to share this with my other partner whom I love and adore. And I want to share the rest of my life with and my world with, just like this other person. But sometimes they're not in that space, maybe while you were gone, one of their partners broke up with them, you don't know. Right. Or maybe they watched a dumb crime movie, like who knows. Right. Like, so it's one of those things where it's like you just checking in. And I think that goes back to the consent piece too. It really does. It's about getting consent from those people that you're sharing this information with and making sure they're okay to receive it.
I just want to touch on something here too with the oversharing piece, because this is about your meta or your partner's partner.
Yeah.
Getting too much information about their personal lives is inappropriate. Unless you have consent. So, for example, say you've had an amazing, wonderful, kinky, crazy night with somebody, and you ask them, is it okay if I tell my other partner about this because I found this really exciting? Right? And they might say yes or no, or they might say you can tell them about this, but not that. Or, if they have a relationship with their meta, maybe they're the ones who would like to share that piece. So then you have a talk with them about what you're comfortable with your partner knowing. And it goes both ways, right? It's not just what does the meta want shared about them, but also what do you want the meta to share about you and your relationship, right? And sometimes you have a really good, clear understanding of another partner's level of receiving, level of openness to hearing, right? So you could say, well, I know you guys are going out for coffee or a drink or going to go shoot pool or something. So great. But while you're doing that, maybe just don't mention the great, wonderful sex we had tonight, right? Because I know that my partner gets triggered by that, or they're not ready for that information or whatever.
Right.
Yep. It's a lot of conversation and dialogue.
It is. And I think bringing all of that, maybe some people are listening going, well, what does all this have to do with jealousy? Well, I think the idea here is that we're providing a safe space because that's part of where jealousy comes from. And so in my opinion, that's the biggest part of where jealousy comes from, is that lack of safety, that insecurity that comes with not feeling balanced and safe in a relationship and in that attachment.
Or not perceiving safety. Right,
exactly.
Like it's a perception often, not necessarily factual.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's the stories that we tell ourselves often, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really what's really happening. So if you're going in and you're trying to be, and you're being mindful of what the person's receptive to and what their bandwidth might be in any given moment, then you're not forcing them into a space of feeling insecure when they're not ready to do that. Which leads me to the next one, which is the lessen the exposure or provide more exposure. And that varies, again, like we talked about earlier, depending upon the person and the dynamic and consent and all of that stuff. So that's kind of what all of this has to do with. And you mentioned communication. Communication to me is kind of the key. Like it's at the top of my list of needs in any partner. Is that honest and transparent communication. It's what I need. And communication might often just be, hey, check in with me. Yeah. Ask me how I'm feeling. And let me do the communicating, right? Let me tell you what I'm comfortable hearing. You and I have an understanding where that's concerned, and we move very comfortably within that understanding.
But we also take baby steps, right? Like that's the thing. After a date, I don't come home and start talking about how wonderful the date was. I wait until you ask, right? How was it? And then I give you this much information. I give you a sentence, right? It went really well, right? And then I leave it. I let you guide the conversation from there to see what you're interested in knowing, how much bandwidth you've got to manage it. Like, if it's late at night, you might just be like, great, good night, right? Let's go to bed. But if you're more curious and you're feeling, particularly grounded that day, you might be open to hearing a little bit more, right? And the thing that I want to share primarily with my partner is, how do I feel? How do I feel? Not the specific acts, right? But how do I feel? For some people, there's a little bit of like interest in the specific acts, and as long as you have consent, go for it. It's, totally cool. But I'm more interested to share that, and also to hear that. Like, if something shifts in your relationship with somebody, and suddenly it moves out of a sort of that friendship area into, wow, there's some chemistry here, right? This is worth exploring. Then I want to know when that happens.
Right.
But we've talked about that. And that's how we've navigated that, is through dialogue and communication. And guessing your way through this will lead to all kinds of landmines along the way. So
yeah, shutting down and guessing, I mean, that's dangerous territory, for sure.
Yes.
It's and making assumptions too. I think, well, I guess guessing, assumptions, the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Shutting down, I just want to address that a little bit. So one of the things that I've noticed about myself is that I do need processing time. Right?
No. Let me clarify. Shutting down and processing are two very different things.
I know. Yeah.
I know you know, but I want to clarify for the audience listening. In my opinion, shutting down and processing things are very different.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, shutting down means, it's a rigid no. I'm not listening to anything you have to say. I feel this way, and that's the end of it. Period. End of discussion. I'm not talking about this anymore ever again. Don't ever bring it up. I don't ever want to talk about it.
Or even withdrawing your affections.
Yeah, exactly. Withdrawing your affections, turning to punitive behaviors, and, or passive aggressiveness. All of that stuff is shutting down. That's not what I'm talking about. That is what I'm talking about. That's the kind of shutting down that can be damaging and is very risky and dangerous territory to be in. Sure. Yeah. And then processing is very different. Processing is, hey, you know what? Processing in my mind is very mindful and aware. It's like, hey, I need some time to step back from this and give this some thought. So let's reconvene in a day and we'll talk about it if I'm feeling up to it. If not, I will let you know at that time, and we'll set another time frame, and then we'll keep doing that. That's processing. That's allowing your partner. And that's actually one of the things that we talked about too, is giving your partner the time necessary to process. Giving them the space and the time that they need to process the information that you're giving them, or the shift or the change in the relationship or whatever, right?
Well, yeah. And each time something shifts or changes, whether it's positive or negative, your other partners need that time to adjust a little bit sometimes, right? Like, they're just like, okay, new information. And so, yeah, I think that's a really key piece is being aware of that. And it's not just what you're going through, but your mindset, your emotions, your romantic life, your sexual life impacts other partners, right?
Right. Exactly. Good point. Excellent point. And then I think the last thing that we have here on the list is, and I really like this, and I don't take credit for this list. I actually give you all the credit for the list. It's a great list. Understand that it comes from a lifetime of mononormative programming, so be patient. Some will never fully be able to expunge jealousy, but they can learn to manage it. And so that's really, for me, that really resonates with me, because there have been times in my life where I have been severely overly jealous, especially in my early 20s. Like, I got so jealous of my first wife that I would get upset when she would go to the gynecologist. Yeah.
Honey.
Yeah.
Honey.
Right. And so that was I'm 52 today. So that was 30 some years ago. right? So I was 18, 19 years old. And I had, I was a kid with no experience in any of this. And that was very mononormative programming happening right there. And while I'm much farther.
I'm just gonna interrupt you and say that's even like edging on the possessive ownership,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Very toxic.
kind of controlling,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
Like when we're
Very
talking
toxic.
mononormative programming, there is that aspect of things like pursue and own and possess and your mind and all that stuff and sort of the narrative. But then there's sort of the understanding that there is, well, is there? Maybe there isn't. I don't know. I'm starting to question things right here, right now. So I've always assumed that in the traditional narrative of mononormative programming, like the fairy tale stories, we understand that there's a romantic element. There's a, I guess, an assumed romantic element, and that the idea of you're mine is reciprocated and consensual, right?
Mhm.
And so when we get into really punitive behaviors or fear-based thoughts, like what you were just saying, like I'm jealous of my partner, my wife going to the gynecologist. Ooh. Uh, that's, I think, the sort of the end of the sort of tip of the spectrum where it's really controlling and really fear-based and could be quite harmful, right?
It was, and it is incredibly toxic. Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
incredibly toxic for her and for me. Absolutely. There's
I'm
no
sorry
doubt
that
about it.
happened.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that it happened to her as well. Like she didn't deserve that. And, I feel, I've done a lot of processing from that and stuff, but that's still one of those things in my life that sticks out. So when I speak about jealousy, I know it intimately. I mean, and it's something that I lived with for quite a while. The point that I'm trying to make is that even now, 30 years later, I'm still not completely over being jealous. I still have those moments. Even though
Yeah.
I've done all of this work and I've identified as consensually non-monogamous for the last 15, 16 years now.
Mhm.
And, I've experienced jealousy as recently, high levels of jealousy and uncomfortableness as recently as last year. So it doesn't, for a lot of us, it doesn't just go away.
Mhm.
And it's not about trying to get it to go away, because jealousy can be a gift, right? Like we wanted to touch on this. I'm just going to put this up to the camera and talk about this for a minute. It's called The Language of Emotions. Hopefully that's not backwards for the people looking at it, but and it's by Carla McLaren. It's like what your feelings are trying to tell you. And so this
Mhm.
is a little card that you can get. She's got a stack of them about different emotions, but I love this one because it says honoring jealousy. And she says the gifts of jealousy can be fairness, commitment, security, connection, and loyalty. Right? This is my favorite part because you know me, I'm a questions guy. I like to ask questions, right?
Mhm.
So, what are the internal questions that you could be asking yourself once that 90-second wave has kind of run its course and you're able to get back into your head to get a little bit more and process the thoughts that are and the feelings that are happening and get in touch with the awareness of everything and become mindful? What has been betrayed here? And then what must be healed and restored? And so in poly, in the consensually non-monogamous world, I would suggest that the question what needs to be healed and restored comes up a lot, right? Not necessarily betrayed, but what needs to be healed and restored. So it can be a gift in a lot of ways because it's one of those opportunities. Okay, so I'm feeling this again. What's coming up for me? What am I not? What am I feeling insecure about? Let me get curious about these emotions and these feelings. So if you can look at it that way, then it can really serve you in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. Right? Does that make sense?
It does. And you can look at what needs are going unmet in the relationship, focusing on your relationship, not what they're doing with their other partners, but on yours, right? So like just going back to the triggers, the things that can happen. So they take their new partner to your favorite restaurant and you feel like you've been sort of invaded or your territory has been invaded. So what aspects of your relationship could be tended to in a way that helps alleviate that or change that for you, right? Is it that you're not getting enough time with your partner so that restaurant experience feels very, I need to protect this, right? Is it that you don't have enough of your own territory that isn't untouched by others, right? Like maybe you're in a very busy household and you don't have a lot of personal space. Is there a way to manage that so that you're finding personal space, right? So there's other avenues to address the maybe root cause of the trigger, and also looking at the limiting belief that's beneath it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need to be special, and by taking this person to our restaurant, I am no longer special.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to unpack there, right?
Right.
So yeah, I don't want to get into all of that, but that's
Yeah,
a really interesting piece.
If you do feel the need to get into all of that, you can contact either one of us, and we're happy to be coaches for you.
Yeah, you are.
Because that's part of what we do, is we help people get into that and unpack that and work through it and find the limiting beliefs that are underneath that.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that, that we've got here is we're talking about what to do, if you're jealous, right? So if you're the one, right? And if you're
hang on, I don't want to move on to that yet.
Oh, okay. I thought that would be a great segue. Yeah, sure. No problem.
No, we missed one.
We did. Which one
did.
did we miss?
We missed don't fetishize or encourage jealousy.
Yes. Right. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by fetishize it.
Well, it's a very big part of the mononormative culture. The idea that I register that you value me when you are jealous.
Oh.
And you can buy into that and almost intentionally trigger your partner to receive that feedback from them.
So in other words, go out and flirt with somebody in front of them, so that, because it's not really about the other person, it's about trying to get your partner's attention.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because we see that a lot in movies, hey?
A lot. Yes. Every 80s movie that ever there was.
Right? Well, if they don't want me, I'm going to go find somebody else and make them jealous, right? Right? I mean, that's like the love triangle thing. I don't know if that's all love triangles, but
no.
But I'm saying but then I'm also thinking about the manipulation that's inherent in that too.
Right. And the dishonesty, right? We're not saying to our partner, hey, I'm feeling disconnected from you. We're going out actively engaging with another person for the purpose of stoking the fire of jealousy so that I get more attention.
Getting that passion back up again, right? We often confuse passion and jealousy.
Yeah.
Right? And then the other thing that comes to mind too is what about that other person?
Right.
Right?
What about their feelings?
They're just a pawn in this whole thing, and they have no idea what's happening or what's going on either, right? And maybe they're falling in love with this person, and then come to find out that they were only being used. I mean, how many times have we seen that in movies, right? Like it's So the other thing too is the fetishizing part. Like, and maybe I just don't understand what the word fetishize means. But it means to make a fetish of something.
Yeah, and so it can also be a turn on, right? It could be that hot wifing kind of turn on, or the what would be the equivalent on the men's side?
The bullying?
Bullying? I don't know what it's called.
Like the bull, yeah.
Yeah. So, the idea that your partner is going out having encounters with other people, enjoying them coming home, telling you all the juicy details, and that gets you off, right?
Okay, but let's put a caveat in here though, because there are people that do that, and there are people that do that consensually. And there are people that is a kink for them, and that is something that they are open and honest and consensual about amongst all parties involved. So, I mean, you go out and you say, hey, look, if it's a woman, my husband is a cuckold. He loves to watch me and hear me have sex with other people. And so are you interested in doing that with us? Right. And that's all consensual stuff. Or, I mean, there's a myriad of ways that you can do that. But just understand that we're not saying that that dynamic is unhealthy or wrong in any way.
No.
But what we are saying is that doing it with the sole intention of provoking jealousy to get passion back or whatever without consent and without communication and transparency can be damaging and unhealthy.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
And it's not always about sometimes it's a really negative experience for the partner who is receiving this information, and it's not a turn on for them. It's a trigger. And their jealousy, their rage, their desire suddenly to maybe reclaim their partner sexually has very little to do with, love or joy or compersion or right? Connection. It's not about connection, it's about control. It's about I need to now have you because somebody else did. And so the partner that's bringing home that information is the one who's fetishizing the jealousy of their partner, right?
Right. Yeah.
They're using the third person. They're bringing in the information to stoke the fire of that passionate rage that then requires, or it feels like it requires, an outlet.
So they think
often in the bedroom, right?
So the person that brings that energy home, that is engaged in that fetishization, thinks that they're getting connection from the person because they're being paid attention to in a sexual way. But the reality is they're not, because it's not about them. It's about that other person reclaiming control. So it really has nothing to do with them and everything to do with that other person's insecurities.
Right. And so, if that happens and it's not intentional and it's just kind of oh, that happened, I felt this instead of that. All of that is good dialogue to have. All of that is, really important honesty to have. But if it's a habit, right? If it's intentional, it's a habit, it's manipulative, it can be harmful over time to your relationship, right? And so we just want to make sure that it's not.
Right.
That's my goal.
Right. And I hope that we've done enough to make everybody seen and heard in that, because there's a lot that can be unpacked in that process. And there's a lot of people that do engage in those kinds of behaviors in very healthy ways. And there are a lot of people out there that do it with intent, and everybody knows exactly what's happening and what's going on, and there's open communication. So I just want to reiterate that we are not trying to put any shade on that at all. We're just simply trying to say that if there is some other element of that can be harmful and dangerous and damaging to a relationship, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I don't want.
I think you did a good job.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to move on to what happens if we're the ones experiencing the jealousy, what we might be able to do for ourselves, what kind of internal work we can do, or things that we can, tools maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to?
I'll do that.
Go for it.
So one of the big pieces of this is recognizing that you are unique and that you offer your wonderfulness to any partner, and that comparison is the thief of joy. So a lot of my clients who are, for example, dating somebody who's been married for 20 years, they feel insignificant or less secure because their time with their partner is relatively new. And they're comparing, 20 years to 5 months and feeling like, how could they possibly care as much about me as they care about their spouse or their partner? Well, the point is that,
or I'm never going to have a time to have that 20 years, right? Like, I'm never going to be able to catch up, as it were.
Exactly. It's not possible.
Right.
And one of the things about comparison is that we're always comparing apples and oranges. There's no two people on the planet that are the same. And I liken it to food, right? I think I like ice cream and I like salads. A really good salad. Oh, yeah. It's crisp, it's crunchy, it has all the little bits in it. I love that.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
And then, there's ice cream and it's creamy and soft and yummy and delicious and sweet.
Mhm.
And, the differences I appreciate so much. And I
Mhm.
don't want a life full of ice cream and I don't want a life full of salad. I want a life where I can have both or,
Mhm.
introduce a sandwich every now and then.
Or put some nuts in. Put some nuts in your ice cream.
Honey, behave. Yeah. So, you're unique, you're special in your own way. And I know that that sounds cliche and people have a hard time kind of grasping that sometimes, but
There's probably a couple of people rolling their eyes right now, I'm sure.
yeah, but it's
But it's
the
true.
truth.
It is true.
You
It is
won't
absolutely
experience the same relationship with two different people. It's impossible.
right.
Impossible.
Yeah, good. So advocating for your needs, and I'm going to add setting boundaries and honoring your boundaries to that. So this is something that I don't know about you and your work, but in my work with clients, this is something that comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is this idea that we're not shown how to advocate for our needs. We're told that it's selfish to do that, right? We're told that setting boundaries and advocating for what we want and stuff is selfish, and that we should just be, not we, but the collective we, right? That we should just agree with everything and be agreeable to everybody and stuff. But the reality is that's just as harmful and damaging to us as being on the other end of the spectrum, where everything is so rigid and so concrete that there is no room for flexibility, right? So the idea here is to find a balance between those two things, right? So if you're feeling jealous and you're feeling like you have some unmet needs, or you're getting curious and you're asking yourself what needs to be healed or restored, or what's the fracture here, advocate for that. Say, hey, you know what? I don't know what's happening with me right now, but this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I think I need from you, or this is what I think I need, and are you able to help me with that? And along with that, you can also say, hey, this is a boundary for me. And it's important to understand, and I know we've talked about boundaries before, but it's important to understand that boundaries are not rigid. And boundaries are not about the other person. They're about telling the other person how you want to be treated. And they need to have some flexibility to them, right? So they can't just be, this is the way it is and that's forever. That's it. That's a rule. That's a controlling behavior. A boundary has to be, and I'm sorry for the hands, but a boundary has to be flexible. And within that boundary, you can start to advocate for things and experiment with things in a different way. And you can say, hey, maybe we can try this next time and see if that works a little bit better for both of us or all of us or whatever. And maybe we can try this or that or whatever. I'm starting to lose my way here because I'm getting excited and a little bit outside of my head. But so the advocating for the needs piece is critical to your own health and your own well-being, and sharing with other people how you want to be treated, and then also what your needs are, because people aren't mind readers.
Can I just bring something up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there may be boundaries that aren't flexible. But in my experience, even the ones that I thought were not flexible became flexible once I experienced someone crossing the boundaries. Now, is that healthy? Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it means that I am too allowing. I'm allowing someone to cross my boundaries repeatedly, and I'm making excuses for it. And I'm fine with it because the alternative means that I have to step away from the relationship or change what I'm doing. And I don't want to do that. So the other part of that is it could be healthy in that it's looking at, okay, this happened. I thought it was going to feel this way, and I'm feeling less of that. So maybe it's a little bit okay. Maybe I want to experiment with that being okay and see what that feels like moving forward. And then you re-communicate that new boundary or the shift in the boundary to your partner so that they're aware, right? So I think the idea of flexibility is great. And I think agreements are the same way because they're not rules. They're things that can be negotiated. But there's that fine line of, let's make sure that this is being done in a healthy manner where my boundaries are not being pushed or crossed without my consent repeatedly. And I'm just people pleasing and
Right.
allowing.
Exactly. The balance is the key for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to have balance with that for sure. So thank you for pointing that out.
Cool. So the next one, recognizing your behavior. Yeah, recognizing your behavior. So if I'm feeling jealous and I shut down, like we were talking about earlier, I withdraw from my partner, I withhold my affection, I limit my interaction with them because I feel threatened, right? That can lead to a snowball effect of more disconnection. So I need to look at that and say, is this helpful or not helpful? Am I doing something that is good for our relationship and nurturing our relationship? Or am I actually self-sabotaging a little bit? Because what I want, my goal is connection, but I'm using my withdrawal as sort of a punitive measure in the hopes that my partner will recognize that and come pursue, right?
Right.
And again, that's that passive aggressive kind of behavior. So sometimes, we want to make sure, okay, that's not going to help. Also, if you're overly needy, so I'm advocating for my needs, but I'm advocating for my needs all the time, every day.
Or I'm advocating for the same need over and over again, and my partner is continually trying to meet it, but it's just never enough.
It's never enough because you're in reaction mode. You're actually tuning into all of your limiting beliefs and the stories that you're telling yourself and the assumptions that you're making, right? So at that point, your partner can do all of the good stuff and show up as many times as they are able to, and you still won't believe them. You still won't feel like it's good enough. And that is when you need to turn inward and say, okay, it's no longer about their behavior. It is definitely about my limiting beliefs, and I need to address those. And if you need help, call Leanne. We promised ourselves that we were going to start,
call her, don't call me. Call her, don't come. Okay. So the next one, I guess, is it kind of goes in line with this one, recognizing your behavior and getting in touch with yourself. But that's this is a line from Brene Brown that I absolutely love, and I use it in my life every day, probably. What stories am I telling myself here? And are they true? Right? So really, really understanding that and getting curious about that. What stories am I telling myself? Is this person actually doing something untrustworthy? Is this person actually engaging in damaging or hurtful behavior? Or am I just making shit up in my head? And one of the ways that you can do that is you can do the 3 C's. And I'm not going to get into the details of it. Again, if you want to find out more, contact us. Websites, blah, blah, blah.
That's 3 times. I think we're good.
We need to do 4. So we'll get 1 more coming. Okay. I don't know, just even it out, right? 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for, Anyway, so one of the things that you can use is something called the 3 C's. And this is something that they use in cognitive behavioral therapy.
You're not going to share it, though.
No. Well, I'm just going to tell you what it means. I'm just going to tell you what the 3 C's are. And then that's all I'm going to do. No?
I don't think you should.
I am. I'm going to do it.
It's not a rule, baby. So do what you
Yeah. And that is to catch it, check it, and change it. Because the reason I want to share it is because I think it's important for people out there that might be Googling it. So it's called Catch It, Check It, and Change It. And it's one of the things that you can use. It's a processing tool that you can use to help identify what's going on inside of you and whether or not you're listening to the limiting beliefs that you have, or if what's really happening is true, and then either way deciding what to do about it next, or how to reframe it if it isn't being helpful or it's not true.
Good one. This is something that I actually feel is maybe not a popular opinion, but when people ask, am I enough? And we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but with modern ideation about marriage and coupledom, we have assumed that everybody can be, all things, fulfill all roles for their partner. It's become very dependent on the idea of two becoming one as a unit, operating as a unit, that kind of thing. And what we have found, I think, over time, as we recognize the level of infidelity, the high divorce rates, and the more and more people who are leaning towards consensual non-monogamy, is we find that it's okay to not be enough. It's actually okay to not be all things to your partner. And in fact, I've experienced the, weird role of being that to somebody. So I am their world. I am everything to them. They rely heavily on me. It creates extreme codependence, a lot of enmeshment, a lot of, not independent thinking. And so there's very few times that you can talk to somebody who's in that kind of relationship and get an opinion or a thought that isn't about their partner or shared with their partner or something they want to discuss with their partner first. So, those are the unhealthy kind of attributes, I guess, that can come with trying to be all things to your partner. And then we recognize that there's inherently often disappointment because it's a big ask. It's a huge ask to say to your partner, I want you to be all things to me. And so it's okay to recognize that you're just not going to be enough, right? And it pushes back against all the things we've been taught, all of the ideals and romanticism about relationships. It pushes back against those hard because part of that is selling us on the idea of you're the one. There's only one and you're it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't have to be the one. I just have to be somebody that, you love and care about. And that makes a huge difference, I think, in terms of freeing up the idea of, I can get those needs met elsewhere. I can have another partner for that, or I can have friends for that, or I can have family for that. I can have community for that. I can have, a global community for that through the internet, whatever it is. I can get those needs met elsewhere. You don't have to be everything to me, right? So I think it's one of the questions that people grapple with when they're feeling jealous. And it's a limiting belief that a lot of us hold onto. Mm-hmm. I'm not enough. I'm not enough.
Right.
And my take on that is you're not, and it's okay.
Right. I think, do you mind if I express what comes up for me when you say that?
I want you to, please. Okay. I invite you to.
Thank you. So what comes up for me is, I think there's a distinction there between being enough for somebody else and being enough for yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I remember when you and I first met and we talked about, why I'm non-monogamous and all of that stuff. And one of the things I said that it's a lot of responsibility to expect that somebody else, one other person, is going to be all things to you in a relationship. And to that end, the other person, we talk about engaging with other people and going out, the next one here is get busy living your life. And we'll just kind of clump this in because I think it all relates. You are enough for yourself. Right. And so that's really the core. And maybe this is the great way to wrap all of this up, because ultimately underneath all of this is this understanding that if you can do the work and find a way to understand that you are your own best foundation and you are your own best resource for everything that happens in your life, and you really get secure with that belief, then it won't necessarily eliminate the jealousy, but it will certainly mitigate it, and it will help you process and deal with it in healthier and more resilient ways should it come up.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, the idea here is that you are enough, right? I mean, how many times do we hear that I'm not enough, or I don't feel like I'm enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not strong enough, or fast enough, or smart enough, right? But the reality is you are. Everybody is perfect exactly the way that they are. And, we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we have. And the ultimate thing here is that while you might not be enough for one other person, to expect yourself to be all things to that person is an enormous amount of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, that's the kind of relationship that I witnessed growing up with the adults around me, was the ideal of that. And the constant disappointment that their partner could not be there in those ways all the time for them.
Right.
And I think that's formed a lot of my philosophy around consensual non-monogamy and why I like it, why I think that it's good for me, and good for my partner, because, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's that expansiveness that allows you to make choices autonomously, and you find your authentic self, you find your authentic relationship, you find your authentic intimacy, right?
Right. Beautifully said.
So shall we end it there?
I think we shall.
We shall.
We shall.
Let's. We shall end it there.
Yes. Can we do this in a really bad British accent?
I don't know if I can do a really bad one, but I'll try. And remember,
choose love
and keep it kind. Cheers.
Cheers.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions. And remember to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Now Relationship Support and Advice for All.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
and leannemillion.com,
or follow us on Instagram at gregmillion.lifecoach
and at leannemillion.
I'm feeling insecure right now. So.
Are you feeling insecure right now?
No.
Are you?
No.
Are you really?
No, I'm not really. Don't try to trick me. You cagey bastard.
I'm checking in with you, baby. Are you feeling insecure?
I'm feeling fine. I'm feeling secure in the moment.
Are you?
A little, yes, a little chilly. Why do you sound surprised?
I'm not surprised. I'm happy for you. I want you to be secure. Be secure.
I'm happy.
Be secure.
Let's do this.
Okay, ready? Episode 9, jealousy in consensual non-monogamy. Try not to.
I thought it was episode 10.
What?
I thought you said 9. This was our 10th episode.
9.
Oh.
9.
9.
Ach du Liebe, 9.
Ach du Liebe.
All right, ready? 5, 4, 3, 2. Hi, and welcome to episode 9, jealousy in consensual non-monogamy. I'm going to do that again. Fuck. What the fuck is the term? Okay, I'm going to try that again. Are you ready, Greg? 5, 4, 3, 2.